Welcome to Never Rewrites. I'm Isaac Askew.
And I'm Jeffrey Sherman. And today we're going to discuss the two-clock problem. So the two-clock problem, and I've learned recently that this is not actually a common phrase, that people don't talk about it. I thought they did. But I guess that's just my imagination.
I haven't heard it.
You've never heard it. I had to think about it after I realized that it wasn't a common thing. And I realized I got it from a Jack London book. And if you remember, Call of the Wild is more than 150 years old. Well, maybe it's 150 years. Anyway, Jack London did not live recently.
Great way to start this episode.
So the two-clock problem. If you have a clock, right? If you have something for scheduling, and you suspect it's wrong, and so you have adding a second clock by itself won't help you at all, because you won't know which of them is wrong and how much each of them is wrong. So you could have one good clock and one bad clock, or you could have two clocks that are bad in different amounts. Mm-hmm. And if all you have is two clocks, the second clock doesn't help you at all. It doesn't tell you anything that you didn't know. But if you had three clocks, you could start getting consensus. But with two clocks, you're no better off.
Can all three clocks be wrong if there were three?
Well, no, if you have three, then you can get consensus and have an idea, or at least a rough... You can look at the three clocks and kind of have a consensus or some way of determining which clocks are better for your use case. But if you have two clocks and you have no way to compare them, then the second clock doesn't get you anything. And I thought this is a great metaphor for rewrites, because if you have a system, and I've dealt with many systems, like, oh, well, we know the data's wrong. Okay, cool. You don't really know that the data's wrong. You think the data's wrong. You think the data is some amount of wrong. You're like, oh, yeah, this data is probably 90, 95% correct. We don't think it's 100% correct. It's like, okay, and there's no way to fix it, so we need to rewrite it. And so you rewrite it, and the new system. How do you prove that the new system, the data is correct or more correct? Because all you have are now your two clocks. You have the answer from the old system, and you have the answer from the new system, and they don't agree, which you expected.
Mm-hmm.
But how do you know that the new system is better or is more correct?
You don't.
You don't. You have no empirical evidence that the new system is better than the old system. It's a two-clock problem. Adding the new system doesn't improve your understanding.
Got it. Okay.
The only way to understand it would be to take the clocks apart, metaphorically, and understand that, and tweak them until they run the same. Right? That would work, right? Then you'd have two clocks, and you can reset them and then verify that, come back the next day and verify that they still have the same time. And cool. But by the time you've tweaked them to work the same, one, you've now spent all this time and money, and you don't need the second clock anymore, because now the first clock and the second clock agree. And two, you still don't actually know that the thing is right. You now have consensus, but you don't actually have any evidence that the answers are right.
They could work incorrectly the same now.
Right. And so I thought this was a great metaphor, because what happens with rewrites a lot is you write the new system and you get everyone's happy. Theoretically, it's only been, you said it was going to take 6 months. It's only been a year, and you're ready to go into production. You say, okay, cool. Hey, this report, the numbers are different. And you say, yeah, we totally understood that. We knew the numbers were going to be different because the new system is better. And you put it out there, you show your customers, and the customer says, well, the numbers are different. Why are the numbers different? And you don't know.
Yeah.
And so you then have to pull it, or you have to then... It goes to, you're going to eventually have to figure out why the two systems are different.
Right. So let's say you go through and find some busted, so as you go through and you see what how your current system is behaving, is kind of like the same thing we talked about in recent episodes, where you're characterizing the current behavior anyway by doing that. Because otherwise, if you're rebuilding the system, like why are you rebuilding it? If your
Mm-hmm.
data, if you're like, oh yeah, the analytics are going to be better and more reliable, but you don't really know if your current data is reliable to begin with, then sure, your system can make that same data faster, but it can still
Maybe.
just be as unreliable. And
Right.
that same kind of characterization work that we need is enough to make us not want to rewrite anyway, because we already characterized it. We corrected the
Right.
data in investigating it. Yeah.
Because on one side, you have the old system, which has bugs, you believe.
Mm-hmm.
And on the new side, your new system doesn't have bugs, but it has edge cases that haven't been implemented. Right. And that's the dichotomy of now you need to find out what's an edge case versus what's a bug.
Mm-hmm.
And once you found all the bugs and fixed them, or brought in all the edge cases, you basically have the same system all over again. And this is why rewrites go to die. Like they get 80-90% done, and then the 2 clock problem strikes. And by the time you have figured out why the 2 clocks differ, there's no more, the project's done. You might as well have not done it. You could have invested your time and efforts into just fixing and understanding and fixing the current system.
Right. And you still have the same problems from all the things we've talked about before, where two systems are being built at the same time. You're losing a lot of money. One might not go into production. There's a lot of risk involved.
Mm-hmm.
So it just goes back to the same thing. If you spend some time under the kitchen sink, understanding how your system works and bettering it slowly, it's more cost efficient in the long term, even if the code might look ugly. And you might be tempted to rebuild the kitchen sink.
Right. Yeah, it goes back to like it's hugely expensive because you've had a whole nother project. You've probably had to hire extra developers. I've been hired more than once. I've worked on assignments where, oh, we've got a new group. We have a group of developers who are building a new system. We need you to do keep the lights on work.
Mm-hmm.
And that can, like, hiring developers, getting them up to speed, and having them work for a year is extremely expensive.
Yes, it is.
And at the end of the day, if you don't know, if you don't have a solution to your 2 clock problem, it's going to stop you from getting into production, and you're never going to get a return on anything.
Sounds about right. Never rewrite.
Never rewrite. So, just to summarize what I think we're saying, just we want you to be aware that there's this 2 clock problem of if you don't know how your current system is wrong, then you won't be able to verify that your new system is correct. And you need to come up with a solution for that, or know how you're going to approach it before you get close to into production. Because otherwise, you're going to have to. It's going to block you. It's going to be a production blocker. And two, by the time you find that, you're probably not. It's probably not going to be worth doing a rewrite anymore. Which I guess is the thesis of our show. But yeah,
Turns out if you take a lot of these problems and play them out in your head pretty much every time, it's just more cost effective to not rewrite. And
yes,
you have a better system. You don't have to worry about hiring too many people, training all those people, it not going into production. It's just a complete burn of cash. So right. I think the TLDR too, instead of just never rewrite, maybe the flip side is just more like, but I guess there's not a good like two word phrase for this, but essentially just spend more time understanding your system, like pairing on it, spreading the knowledge of how it works, documenting it, and that will get you much further and at least mitigate a lot of the reasons that you felt like you wanted to rewrite.
Right, that's a great call out. One of the things that we emphasize a lot is a new system isn't going to get you away from having to understand the current system. It's just when you could do it at the front, or you could do it at the back, where it's much more expensive. But in all cases, you're eventually going to have to understand the current system.
Yep.
And that might cause you to never rewrite. All right. Well, thank you all for listening. I'm Jeffrey Sherman.
And I'm Isaac Askew, and this is Never Rewrite.